My name's Bill, it's not Mighty Mouse. You like that little rap?
There you go. You got a freestyle there.
There we go.
Nice.
Good morning. Nice. Gridiron 360 on the mic, Bill and Dave. We're doing our college football podcast here. What we're going to do, we're going to recap week 12 in terms of the big games. It looks like Dave's got about 7 games that we're going to review, and then an additional 3 games, which were the big 3 games of the weekend. The first 4 of the top 7 will incorporate the 4 top teams in the country based on the college football playoff rankings. Then we're going to flip it over to a preview for this coming week in week 13. We'll dice that up together. Then we'll jump back on and give you a little championship picture conversation based on last night's, what is this, week 3 of the college football playoff committee rankings.
Yep.
So let's go.
All right.
First game that we want to talk about includes the number 1 team in the country as it stands before the rankings yesterday and after, and that is the Louisiana State University Tigers as they traveled over to Oxford to take on the Ole Miss Rebels. Obviously, LSU goes into this game undefeated, 9-0. They win the game, so now they're 10-0. Final score was 58-37. Ole Miss went into the game at 4-6, taking a loss, 4-7, under 500. It doesn't look like they'll make a bowl game this year.
I think they're officially out, actually, with 2 games to play.
Okay, so I'm going to run through a couple stats. Joe Burrow did his thing. 32 of 42, 489 yards, 5 TDs. Had 2 picks in the INT column. That's something we've not seen a lot of. If there's been any, maybe 1, but he's been pretty good at not turning the ball over in terms of throwing interceptions. On the ground, I mean, this Clyde Edwards-Helaire kid, I think, as great as Burrow is, he's just getting overshadowed by Joe Burrow because he is doing some great things. And, we know I'm a Clemson fan. I liken it to the conversation about Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne gets, forgotten about sometimes.
Sure.
23 for 172 yards and 1 TD. Really good. The receiving core went bonkers. Jamar Chase, 8 for 227, 3 TDs. Justin Jefferson, 9 for 112, 2 TDs. Thaddeus Moss, 5 for 63. He's a tight end, ladies and gentlemen, not a receiver.
And is he the son or nephew?
He's the son, buddy.
Son? Okay, I
couldn't remember. Mossed. You got mossed. If anyone watches,
for a tight end, he's got daddy's tiptoe.
Yeah, what is that? Monday Night Football, they do the new segment with Randy Moss on there. You got Moss. We're showing great catches, and they went through it this week, and he didn't mention his son, and then the counterparts say, we have an additional one for you, and they showed him his son making the catch in the Alabama game, the toe tapper. So good for him. He was pumped up. On the other side of the ball, Ole Miss, not getting much accomplished in this game in terms of showing me a whole lot. It was a lot of catch-up mode. That's why I say that. It wasn't like they were really threatening at any time. I mean, Ole Miss or LSU was out 14-0 in the first quarter. I will say, though, and a lot has been said this week about how quarterback number 10 for Ole Miss, John Rice Plumlee, just went crazy on that Ole Miss defense.
You mean on the LSU defense?
On the LSU defense, sorry. Yeah, he's the Ole Miss quarterback. Not from a passing game, but from a running game. He was 9 for 16 passing, 123 yards to the air, 0 TDs, no picks.
1 pick.
0 TDs, 1 pick. That's not good. Now, on the ground, he was 21 carries for 212, 4 TDs. That's incredible.
That's an incredible running back stat line.
But that's too lopsided for a quarterback in my mind. Those passing numbers don't have to be crazy good, but it's got to be better than that, and you can't leave it all on that. Jerrion Ely, the running back for Ole Miss, number 9, 13 carries for 141 yards. He's special, ladies and gentlemen. He's a freshman, true freshman. He was committed to Ole Miss over the summer, decommitted. he was a baseball prospect. He could go. He was, potentially had the opportunity to go play baseball out of high school. Decided to stick with football. Actually, Clemson had him potentially when he decommitted on the radar. I saw him in the All-American game. He is a little guy, but he is shifty, and it's not a guy that you just need to send out wide. Like, he runs great between the tackles. He gets in there and he makes quick moves, and then he's got a burst. Hopefully, Ole Miss as a team can continue to grow the next couple years, so maybe you can really see him on a potentially winning team. They don't have to be a national championship team, but to get more recognition because he is very impressive, and he's just a freshman. So, look, like I said, Ole Miss at no time really had control of this game. The concern for me is that, and we've talked about it, is LSU's defense. This isn't the only time that this has happened. I mean, we're not just talking about Alabama putting 41 on them. I mean, I know Alabama's good, and we all watched that game. But, Florida put 28 on them. Vanderbilt put 38 points on them. Texas, I don't care how you feel about Texas. I know that they're getting a little love based on last night's ranking. I just don't see it. This is Texas. The last year's team of Texas, I totally believe, was better than this year's team. They're not getting better. They lost some pieces. They still have work in progress, whether it's guys hurt, this, that, or the other, new guys. But Texas early in the year put 38 points on them. At the time, that was a huge matchup. We look at it now, and some may still give that some credit. I got to be honest. I look at Wake Forest that we played a week ago, and I don't think they're much worse for the wear than Texas, especially when they had two of their top receivers missing in Sage Surratt and Scotty Washington. But I think that if they were there, they could give Texas a game. Anyways, point is that this defense for Texas leaves a little something.
LSU.
Sorry, folks.
It's all right. It's all right. That's what I'm here for. Here to help a little bit.
Right. So this defense for LSU leaves a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real question is, listen, LSU has a seat at the table at this given point, rightfully so. I don't think there's any arguing it. Their offense is as explosive as anybody in the country. It's as balanced as anybody in the country. But you're right, the defense, and this is going to come to play in the playoff time. Could come to play in the SEC championship game.
Well, listen.
So that'll be kind of interesting.
Put 28 points on them.
Yep.
Here's another little statistical for you. Auburn, LSU 23, Auburn 20. So Auburn not only was able to put some points on and stay in that game, but they held that high-powered offense to 23 points. And I say that to say, and I continue even after this week to say Auburn still, in my mind, has the best defensive line, defensive front all around in the country. So when a good team like that, defense like that, gets on this high-powered offense, they can be slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can put points on them, then that spells a little bit of trouble.
Yep. So again, really the theme of this first section of games is that teams took care of business. How they did is important. I think this, again, I don't think this says a lot for getting up to the playoff, but I think your points are very valid about the defense as we kind of move forward for what it's going to mean when it comes. And when I guess I will include, when I say playoffs, I'm including the championship games all the way around.
Right.
So number 2, we're going to go look at the next game, which was kind of as expected, was Ohio State going to Rutgers, going to New Brunswick. And, this game was over.
Yep.
I mean, I will say this. I guess the best thing I can say about this game is that they did put a couple of points on. I was shocked they put as much as they did on
Rutgers. I was too.
But they still blasted them. I don't have quite that look that I had with LSU defensively. To me, Ohio State should be number 1 right now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's irrelevant. I still think the right teams. It'll
they have
play
their
out.
toughest games here ahead, and that's crazy to say since we're already at the end and they really haven't had one, but they will.
Yeah, but I guess my point is they're taking care of business. They've done nothing but take care of business, and Rutgers was the latest speed bump on the Ohio State freight train heading towards one big matchup this week and then potentially to the title of the Big Ten and into the playoffs. So next we went to Wake Forest.
Here, wait.
All right.
We
Sorry.
forgot to mention the best defensive player in the country, Chase Young, DN for Ohio State, got his game suspension reduced by a game, so he will be out there this week against Penn State, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. It's 2-game suspension, which I think was. I'm glad to see they did that. I didn't feel like a 4-game or a season-ending was. I wanted to see how it played out. It did sound a little fishy when it was first released.
We talked about it. Yep.
But it did come out. I mean, honestly, like I look at it and go, what guy doesn't want his girlfriend to come with him too?
Yeah, I mean, come on, dude.
So I you know,
who knows if it was even actual money exchange? It could have been somebody that gave him some Delta Sky miles. I mean, it was a little silly.
Yeah,
I get
was.
you have to be critical of everything,
Yep.
but you're right. I'm glad they reduced it because it was a little silly.
Yes.
And he didn't. You want the best players to be playing in the best games, and it would be a travesty not to have this guy and everything he's done for Ohio State personally and as a teammate, and what they've done as a team for him to not be playing in the next 3 games, which are most critical: Penn State, Michigan championship.
Yeah, and let's just say this too with with Rutgers, they scored a touchdown in 3 different quarters: the first, the third, and the fourth. So it wasn't totally garbage time. But I will say, Ohio State emptied out. The bench. They had 3 quarterbacks go in this game. Justin Fields was 15-19, 305, and 4 touchdowns. Dobbins 17 for 89, Chambers 9 for 56. I mean, it was just a running. They could do everything in this game. So anyway, we move on from there. We'll go on to the Wake Clemson game. I still think Clemson's the I won't say sleeping giant, but I think they're getting looked at as the sleeping giant. I think they're sleeping with one eye open and watching everybody. They went out there. I mean, I didn't expect. Wake was depleted in this game, but this is really, in my mind, this is more about how good Clemson is. They just smoked them. It was just, it wasn't a game. It was 52-3. I know all the talk about how bad the ACC is.
They did score that 3 early in the game, so it was against the first team, but.
And I go back to they scored 3 against the first team, which is a reason why Clemson, again, I went to this last week, and I will say the same thing about Ohio State, and this is what kind of, to me, is going to be the interesting me looking ahead and, assuming an LSU is in this. These are teams playing some monster defense right now. Monster defense. They are crushing people. And you've said it a lot, and I can attest to this. Clemson plays deep. They're one team that I think rotates in players more so than really anyone else I've seen in the country. And some of it is because it's garbage time, but some of it isn't. And this is a reason why a team can go and lose 4 elite defensive linemen and still put up a defense that I think statistically, if I remember looking at it correctly, is actually better than last year's.
It is. And if you look at the stats on this game from the defensive side of the ball, that was the wrong people because they did have a lot too. I mean, we've got just holy crow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 people that registered tackles on defense.
Yep. Yep.
Just registered tackles. So there's guys that were out there that were in the game that did, but 30 that registered tackles. So, look, we held them to about 105 yards total offense. I think they had like 3, 4, 5 first downs in total. Yes, it did make a difference that their 2 big play receivers weren't there. I definitely think that they would have had more offense, had more first downs, had more yards, but I don't think that and it might have not been 52-3. It might have been 52-14 or 17. Or it might have been more than that because we might have kept the offense in longer. Jamie Newman, good quarterback all year. He ran into a buzzsaw, 6 for 14, 41 yards, no TDs, 2 picks. The guy that we always talk about in their backfield that we love is Cade Carney. He's sort of a throwback, all-stot type running back, number 36. He had 3 carries for 2 yards.
Yep. Yeah,
They were going nowhere in this game.
Yep.
we were playing like we need to play. It wasn't like we were playing with our hair on fire. There was some guys like Tanner Muse who was playing with his hair on fire. Why?
Yeah, he looked really good.
Why? Because he's a senior, and it was senior day. It was the last time he'll get to wear the Clemson uniform on our home field. So, and same with Kayvon Wallace. These are guys that wanted to go out with a bang on the home field for their last game. So that's why you saw them kind of go nuts. But for the most part, it was just handling business. Right now, the biggest problem we have is our punter sucks.
It's funny, you've been mentioning that a lot, and he was the one that took the dump early in the game that cost him the 3 points, wasn't it?
Yep. And that I don't want to. You might think that's not a big deal, but my friends, when you get
in the playoffs,
the changing the field with your punt game, and letting your D go out and play, that is extremely important, and we got to get it right. Now, I'll give them this. In the national championship game last year against Alabama, all of a sudden it was like I saw a different guy. He wasn't like the best ever, but it was like way better than I had seen all year.
Yep.
So hopefully he has that in him and can step up. A couple other things to note from that game. Early in the game, Trevor carried the ball, went down on his knees kind of awkwardly and got hit. We saw him come back out on the field with a knee brace on one of his knees. Apparently, it's just a bruised knee. He'll be fine. It seemed like right after that, he was not setting. He was on his right leg. He wasn't setting. That's his back leg when he throws. Like I like to see him. He's kind of on the ball of his foot. But then as the game progressed, it seems like he just kind of played through it. He was comfortable, and he got back to it. I'm sure he'll be fine. We do have a week off this week before we play South Carolina. The two other things, Amari Rogers went out with a stinger, it looked like, in the shoulder. They ended up taking him out of the game. Justin Ross fell awkwardly. It looked like his wrist. Took him out of the game. Didn't matter. From what I understand is they could have, if absolutely desperate, gone back in, but there's no need to hurt those guys. I'm not trying to tee up something for Tua, by the way.
No, but it matters.
We know we have a bye week coming. We have South Carolina. We've already accomplished goal 1 of winning the division, and now it's on to accomplishing goal 2 of winning the state.
Yeah, and look, I'll kind of just wrap with this so we can kind of run through these. But, I mean, Trevor Lawrence went 21 of 27 for 272 yards and 4 scores. What that tells me is, one, he's playing at a very high level. Actually came out and admitted, I don't think it was a really big deal. I think he's just, and I don't think he even needed to admit this. I think everybody kind of knew it. He was putting pressure on himself, which any 19, 20-year-old kid is going to do after an exceptional first year in college. And I think he's been getting more comfortable, but he's getting deadly efficient.
He hasn't
The running game's not slowing down.
in like 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, and they're playing. The other part of this, too, is he doesn't get as big of yards, but this is kind of going to be the difference, and this tells me something about LSU versus like a Clemson as an example. Clemson plays with a lot shorter fields because their defense is stronger. So, you're not going to get 400 yards because you're not running 80, 90-yard drives. You're running, 50, 60-yard drives and sometimes having 40-yard drives. So it just speaks to the defense, I think, a little bit. They rotated in a lot of guys. Etienne, again, continues to put well over 100 yards on the ground with minimal carries. He's just explosive. He's very, very talented. It's going to be a really good potential running back class coming out this year. A lot of studs are available for the draft, so we'll see who comes out early.
And by the way, once the season ends, we're going to dive right into that draft
Oh,
talk.
yeah. So then we'll move on. We'll go to Alabama at Miss State. Listen, we're going to get into this more. We're going to do a podcast about the playoff rankings, and we'll get more into this. Obviously, the big story on this was Tua getting a season-ending injury. Feel for the kid. It's a shame. It shapes the team. But as far as the game goes, I mean, this game, Alabama had them. It was in the second quarter. It was 35-7 when he got hurt. I think the interesting thing to talk about from a game perspective is Alabama scored 3 more points for the rest of the game.
Well, and is that due to this thing? Again, I don't want to dwell on it, but
but we have to start talking about Alabama, the team.
The conversation is this: look, this is football. Things happen. People get hurt, and you can't predict it. And you're not teeing somebody up for failure. Certainly, if you're a coach, but if he wasn't gonna. If he was limping off the field after the LSU game, my thought process going into Miss State is they could handle Miss State without him. So if they're they have one. They're still trying to backdoor their way into this thing based on their ranking, and they have really one big game, and that's at Auburn. And it's a big one. So my thought process is, let's rest him for that all the way till that game. But if you're not, you're not. And they decide not to. I'm not the coach. Fine. He wanted to make sure he got reps and got more comfortable, and he did. And the play got hurt. If you watch on the sideline, Saban was pretty much like, you're coming out. And Tua was the one like, I want to go in. And he said, he wanted to get some practice. It is interesting that that's all that happened after. Now, I guess, is it due to the fact that he was gone, or is it due to the fact that that was such a catastrophic event that it shook the whole team?
I don't think we know until they finish out the season. Certainly, Auburn's
It's not like they went
test.
into the game like, okay, we know Mac's going to be back there. Let's go about our business. I think it kind of mid-game like that shook the team.
Yeah, well, here's the interesting part, and I want to say this, and it'll be important because Alabama right now is in that category of teams that needs to show out every week in order to turn some heads. They're going to have to get in from the quote-unquote eye test because they're not going to get likely the title game. In fact, unless LSU has, I don't know if LSU's game this week is it a conference game? If it's not, then they're locked in. They're locked in.
Well, they still their end of the year game is A&M.
Right, but if they lose that, they win the tiebreaker.
You know what they play this weekend?
Who?
Arkansas.
Okay, so technically speaking, Alabama could still get in. Not obviously very, very minimal chance they could get in the title game, but LSU would have to lose their next two games. And A&M would have to win.
Yep.
So the point of this is what I saw, and we'll talk about this in there, is what goes on with the running game? Because now this has to become the Alabama of old because that's where your skill is. Mac Jones is kind of built off that reality. But now here's the thing is you've got to get Mac Jones playing time, but now you can't risk him getting hurt. So how do you move this going forward?
They have Western Carolina this weekend.
Yes, but they do have Auburn.
Yes,
Auburn's.
But this is a good game for Mac to get comfortable. It's a good game for their running game and Najee Harris to get going. I mean, let's not get it twisted. You didn't see a ton of Najee at the beginning of the year, and then the last several weeks you've seen more and more, especially in that LSU game, phenomenal. And that's really quite, like you said, they need to lean on that. It needs to go back to that old ground and pound.
Yeah, but that's kind of my question is, you still had a half plus to play after Tua got hurt. And just to see them only scoring 3 points, and the question then to me is, can they dominate on the ground? Yeah, you're going to get Mac Jones some time. You're going to try to score some points early in this next game and get him out. Because remember, this was the discussion at the beginning of the year. The problem Alabama has, because the assumption was they were going to play good defense. This is prior to the season starting. Nobody expected them to have the defensive challenges they've had this year. And nobody expected that they wouldn't be able to consistently run the ball. And then that's where we all started having questions early in the year. We're like, where's that defense and where's that running game that we're used to seeing? Well, now, and everybody said then, well, Alabama's going to be in trouble if Tua gets hurt. And unfortunately, I'll never be a fan, whether I don't like a team or not, of injury, taking great players out of games. But they are in that situation now. And the question is, what can they afford to do? And you just mentioned about Auburn and their defensive front is going to be a challenge for them. So I guess the key to this is going to be the evolution of Alabama. I mean, obviously, again, we can go into the whole Tua, but we're going to save too much of it.
Why is it that, the one team that year over year loses so many guys to the NFL, but they don't rebuild, they reload.
Yep.
And that's Alabama. And Clemson is starting
right there with them.
Starting to become that. But now they have a problem with some of their depth, because those linebackers that are freshmen that have started since the beginning of the year due to the preseason injury, I mean, they've gotten better, but they're not Alabama caliber type linebacker. I mean, championship linebackers. Yep. And look, man, Jake Venables, Coach Venables' son for Clemson. He's our second, third string inside linebacker. He's got a ton of work this year because of us rotating guys. He looks good when he gets in there now. So if we were to lose one of those guys, I would feel okay putting him in there with all the pieces around him. I don't see that same thing happening at Alabama. And
well,
those guys have had a lot more time than Jake.
Look, I got to say this. So this whole idea of everybody reloads is true to a point, and Clemson will have this one day. I don't know when, but it'll happen because it happened at Florida State, and we were a pretty dominant program, and I can name tons of other programs. What happens is some guys don't play out the way you want it to. Then you get hit by the injury bug, and really what I see in every year, and because I'm a Florida State minded guy, I look at 2013 and I look at 2014, man for man. In 2014, I could argue we should actually been a better team, and we weren't. And I'll go back to, we lost some defensive players that were very, very good defensive players, but we had just as talented players behind them. What we didn't have was the same leadership caliber of the guys that we lost. I think that's something that Clemson has had more so. Forget the talent. It's important. But forget the talent. You've had leadership step up
especially
every
on
single
defense.
year. Yeah.
Because naturally on offense, the quarterback should be the leader.
Yeah, Simmons is not a guy that I looked at just, and again, from the outside. You might have more as the fan and knowing more about him, but as an outside guy, I didn't look at him and go, oh, that's the leader of the defense last year.
I didn't know. No, not last year.
But look at him. He's the guy, because and it's, again, I go back to the character and the character building. But it's not just good character that creates a leader. There has to be an instinct to lead when things are not working the right way. And I think Alabama's found that component, I don't think skill is missing. I think it's that component that's missing. Who's the guy that gets up on the sidelines after you give up a bad touchdown and gets in everybody's ear and is like, I want to see the best out of you, or says, you better get your hind parts in gear. Who's that guy? And I think that's what they're struggling with defensively. So, again, that's the problem that you can run into when your identity starts to change because of your talent level and adjusting to that. So, again, important to talk about, but we're kind of belaboring it a little bit, but it is important. It's going to be interesting to see how this evolves. They got two critical games to get this right, one being what should be a walkover, but an important tune-up, and then a big defensive matchup against Auburn. All right, so let's move on. We got our next two games. Arizona came to Oregon. I guess the simplest thing is Oregon took care of business in every way. I don't really know that there's a whole lot to say about this one.
No, I mean, it was Arizona comes into the game 4-5. They started off slow, then they got better, and then they kind of hit the skids. The running game was going just fine. Herbert was phenomenal, 20 of 28, 333, 4 TDs. He did have a pick. But I think the big thing to note, and there was a lot of conversation about this last night in the playoff ranking show, when they lost to Auburn at the beginning of the year, just barely, okay, and we see how the committee has honored Auburn, they really were a little depleted from their wide receiving core at that time. And now guys like Juwan Johnson and guys like Johnny Johnson III, Jalen Redd, in particular, Juwan Johnson, he is a stud, number 6. He went 5 for 93 in a TD, but he is a stud receiver. He is one of the best in the country.
Yep.
Okay? On a national stage at the beginning of the year against Auburn, he was not in that game, I believe. He is now, and you are seeing it have some impact. Like, he is making some huge, if you watch the game, he made some huge plays, and he is definitely somebody Herbert loves to go to. If he's in a pickle, this guy is a big guy that'll go up and body you off and get the ball. We talked about it in our other cast. One of the hardest, if not the hardest pass to defend is that back shoulder throw. If you've got the right quarterback throwing it and the right receiver to go up and body you off of it. And he's that guy. So he can be an X factor for this team, I think, down the stretch. But at the end of the day, 34-6 Oregon. At no time was Arizona really even threatening. Khalil, they actually started out Arizona with the Grant Gunnell kid at quarterback.
Yep.
And then it wasn't working, and they brought Khalil Tate in, and they started to see a little life, and that was in the second quarter. They were able to put some points on the board, Arizona was. But it's just that was pretty much the end of the day. I mean, Tate went 7 for 16, 50 yards, no TDs, no picks. But he's more of the runner, but even running 9 for 19.
Yep.
So, again, in no way was this ended up being a problem. If anything, I think it kind of showcased, even though it was a late game, a 10:30 showcased that Oregon's powerful. They're a good team. Justin Herbert is a great quarterback.
Yep. So we'll move on to the other team in that conference that's vying for this last spot, and it's UCLA headed to Utah. Same thing here. Utah just took care of business against UCLA. UCLA has been pretty up and down this year. Had a big win, but also has had a lot of stinker games in this. What I think is most interesting to me about this game, we've talked about this and Whittingham and his tough mentality and their defense, and let's just say they showed up. They had 5 sacks and created 5 turnovers, so there was
they're good.
They were what we thought they were. But the interesting part to me is how this Utah offense has really started to click.
It's humming.
Huntley goes 14 of 18 for 335 yards. Only had 2 scores, so a bunch of guys must have got tackled on the 2-yard line.
So efficient, though.
Yeah,
I mean, every game he gets more and more efficient.
But explosive nonetheless at 23 yards or 24 yards almost per completion. But the real thing I think that's making this thing hum with him is the fact that Zach Moss has been able to really get rolling. This is no paperweight.
No.
Zach Moss, he's a beast, and he ran 17 times for 127 yards, had a couple of scores. What also is kind of interesting is they ran 11 different guys in this game. 11 different guys.
It's crazy, man.
They ran.
Crazy.
Even the punter had a run in this for -2.
Well, they ran. 7 different guys have rushing stats, but from a receiving, how many did you say?
11 guys technically got a
hit. Rushing stats. 11 guys have rushing stats. From a receiving standpoint, they only had 7 guys. Typically, when you look at stats like this on an offense, you see less people on the rush under the rushing stat line.
You put more
and
receivers out in the
receiving.
game. Yeah,
it's crazy, but Utah, Zach Moss, I think he too at the beginning of the year wasn't 100%, and he's continuing to get on. He's flying under the radar. This guy runs real tough. That's the thing. He's not flashy. He's not a guy that you'll see really be that receiving back and jukey, but he runs fast and he runs tough. Okay, much like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, mind you. I think Utah, at the beginning of the year, there was a lot of pump for them, as a potential team. I think, believe it or not, they're doing what they need to do, and they're just flying under the radar. You talk about Clemson. This is the team flying under the radar, and everybody is kind of taught. And I love Oregon and Herbert, but they're going to have their hands full when these two meet in the Pac-12 championship, which is going to happen one way or the other. I mean, the question is are they both going to go in with the same record they have now, which is very possible with what's left, but, they're both going to be there. This team is something that could be scary. They're not flashy. It is the mentality that we talked about Whittingham at the beginning of the year. They are ground and pound. They're tough defense. They don't blow you out in terms of explosive plays left and right, but they handle their business. They beat the crud out of UCLA 49-3, and UCLA has had some good wins this year. They started off bad, and we thought it was that team from last year, and they actually have had some good wins, and the losses they've had have been against some good teams.
Yeah, they've certainly looked better.
So, Utah as a team, I think, is very scary right now. Especially from the national narrative. If it goes and they play Oregon, I mean, everybody's going to be all about Oregon, really, because I think, Justin Herbert, Oregon's, typically when they've been there before, it's been this explosive, high-powered team. They have the fun uniforms. There's more to talk about with a Oregon team, I feel like, than a Utah team, which is, on the surface, ho-hum.
Yep.
But don't overlook them. They're a good team, and I'm stoked. That could be I know the SEC championship will be big. The Pac-12 championship will be, I think, huge, even more so. So,
yeah, it could be very, very interesting. Good team. So we'll move on. The last game we just want to move upon is Indiana, headed out to Happy Valley, take on Penn State. I think really 2 things I saw. Number one, the Indiana, just to be clear, usually an afterthought kind of team. They are bowl eligible. This is a team that came in 7-3, so they are not a cakewalk. But I will say in this, Penn State's running game saved them. Their defense played relatively flat. Clifford was probably the biggest problem of the game. He's just not being efficient.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the air got sucked out of this team in the loss to Minnesota, which is unfortunate. I would have liked to see him play with a little bit more passion because they've obviously got a big matchup this week. So, again, they got the win, but, again, they're another team that they have a better shot than Alabama of getting in the sense that they can still go to the title game for their conference.
Bigger games ahead than Alabama.
But they've got to show out.
Yep.
They're a one-loss team. They've got to show out. So
look, I like this team, Penn State team. You've liked them since the beginning of the year, and they've looked strong. But I do think that the downfall is that Clifford's still young. I'm not saying he's bad. He's just not there yet. He's and at the end of the day, that I think will be their ultimate downfall. I do think that the defense has fallen off. It's a very fast it's that fast speed more so than strength. I mean, they're strong, but they are not typical of your Big Ten defenses where it's mostly like big, strong, slow you down. They're much faster. If anything, they're the fastest defense in the Big Ten. But they have slipped up a little bit as of late the past couple weeks. I think Indiana's a good team, but even to let a team like that put 27 on you.
And 462 yards. They were outgained in this game by almost 100 yards.
Yeah, man. I mean, that, look, all the credit to Indiana for the season they're having. And like you said, this is a team that is bowl eligible, but you just can't, man. I mean, let's be honest. Early in the year, Ohio State went to Indiana. This game was in Penn State, right? Yeah, earlier in the year, Ohio State went to Indiana and just blew the doors off them 51-10.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible. I mean, I can kind of understand after a crushing defeat to Minnesota, with a team that was in the original playoff field.
Their mentality.
And then, well, not just that, but then also, you do have the look ahead because you got Ohio State. It's kind of sandwiched in between there. So this may not be a complete slide, but it's got the looks of the potential of being one. If Ohio State takes them to the woodshed, it's not a strong way to end the year. So,
well, the only consolation I'll give, and it's the same thing, rhetoric. I spit, we spit, pretty much every time we're talking college football. Coaching matters.
Yep.
Okay. And James Franklin's a good coach, and I do feel he'll find a way to make it a game with Ohio State. And we'll talk about that game in the preview, but I do find he'll find a way to get these guys focused.
Yep, I agree.
So now we'll move on to the three big games that we saw this past weekend. Let's start with number 2 there. Okay.
All right.
Let's go Minnesota going to Iowa. Again, another thing I've preached a lot when we talked about college football is that different from most NFL teams, home field advantage does matter. And in this game especially, Kinnick Stadium is one of the hardest places to play. That's where the Giants go to die. It's happened year in and year out. Ohio State's had it. Penn State. They've all gone there with great records and great standings, and they've gone and lost. If you're sitting on the bench, visitor's bench, as a player for Minnesota in this game, you could literally lean over your shoulder and extend your arm and high-five somebody in the crowd. The fans are on top of you. Look, it's cold this time of year. Not that Minnesota's not used to it, but they're coming off a big win. Is it were they too high off of that? I don't really think so. I think they fought in this game. I think it's more so that Kirk Ferentz, the coach of Iowa, and going to play at Kinnick, and then that team in Iowa that will slow you down. They're more of the typical Big Ten defense, run the ball, and because I don't think quarterback Nate Stanley for Iowa's phenomenal. And we had talked about last week how Iowa had as many field goals this season as it has had touchdowns. So it's not like they have this huge explosive offense. It's they ran into a buzzsaw, Minnesota did. They ran into a buzzsaw. Yeah, I don't know what much else to say. I enjoy the story. And don't get it wrong. Minnesota still has an opportunity to get back in this thing. They have an opportunity.
Just like any, yeah.
Because they still could run, and you still got to take Wisconsin, go to the Big Ten championship game, and ultimately, if they play an undefeated Ohio State, they could get themselves right back into the conversation. Are they in? No, but they definitely are back in the conversation.
Yep, absolutely. Something to note, I think, in this game, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, Iowa ruins seasons. That's their MO. They don't get the big, fanfare of, hey, they're the conference leader going into the year. They'll never be that team. It's not to say they can't win games, but they just don't get it. There's always, like you said, the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Penn States, even Wisconsin. So, but they every year they ruin someone's season, and this is Minnesota's turn. I will say, Epinesa. Woo! This boy.
There we go, baby. I've thrown him out there a few times. Tell me about AJ Epinesa.
Guy goes in, 4 tackles, 3 solo. How about 2 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, and a forced fumble, and a partridge in a pear tree. This kid was just wrecking it. I think, to me, that was the big part. I mean, you look,
big players playing big games, they're not going to get they'll get a bowl game, but not playoff picture, right?
Yeah.
This guy is going, and everybody, and look, Chase Young's incredible, okay? And this is a different type of guy because he's more of the speed edge. This guy is big, strong, and he's got length and speed in bed. This is the second defensive end that will be drafted this coming year.
Yeah, I mean, and Tanner Morgan had a very, very good game. 25 at 36, 368. He only had 1 touchdown. When I go back to talking about Epinesa, this defense created 1 turnover, so not huge, but they won the turnover battle because they were clean, but also had 6 sacks. So it was about making the timely play because overall, Iowa was outgained 431 to 290. So there was a lot of the stats really, until you get to the defensive side, say that Minnesota should have won this game. So it really was a matter of making big plays when they had to. This team, especially defensively, knows how to get juiced up. One of the problems they've had is running the ball this year
Minnesota
effectively.
Did not run the ball well in this game.
No, but also Iowa, when we talked about those field goals, is not being able to finish, and it keeps getting put on the arm of Nate Stanley, who's he's more of a game manager type. He had a clean day, was 14 to 23 for 173, did have 2 touchdowns, but they were able to run the ball. They had Goodson ran the ball. He had 7 yards a carry, had a score. Ran for 94 yards. They didn't get a whole lot of plays. The play breakdown is 74 plays from Minnesota to 59 of Iowa. So again, I go back to that defense, but they did just enough. But it's like they're the type of team to me that just hangs in there, and they create this doubt in some of these stronger teams. Like, man, what do we got to do to get past this team? Like, what? We should be blowing this team out, and we can't blow them out. Like, what's going on? And they're just good at that. And it's almost like at the end, and again, they had a shot, Minnesota, and it just didn't play out. So,
yeah, I mean, look, it's Nate Stanley's a guy he's a senior, and it's unfortunate to call him a game manager. You'd hope he'd kind of develop further than that because he's been a starter for at least, I think, 3 of the 4 years. But it is what it is. But they've. Again, good coaching, man. Kirk Ferentz, he's a good coach. Epinesa is a madman. I'm excited to see him in the NFL.
Yep.
Real quick, we have 2 more big games. I'm going to mix this up on you. We're going to stop it after this because we're getting folks, we might mention time on this because we want you to not have to sit here. We understand some of them get longer, so we're trying to keep them all in an hour. So we're going to wrap up the recap in just one fell swoop, and then we'll add our preview. We'll start with a preview of Week 13 in the next cast, and then dive right into championship picture, if we can. I think we can. All right. So let's move on to the next game. That was the Sooners traveling to Waco, Texas, to take on the undefeated Baylor Bears.
Yeah. I mean, I had said to you before, I thought the best. Oklahoma clearly trying to get back into the picture. Baylor not having a seat at the table, but undefeated and probably winning out the rest of the year, would be probably the one most talked about for not getting in, I would say, at this point with an undefeated season. So I kind of looked at it. We were talking a little bit about what are Oklahoma's chances. My feeling is Oklahoma, this had to be a close game, would be the best shot for them, and then for them to go into the championship game against Baylor and blow them out.
Mm-hmm.
That would be their best look for what they can control. It played out that way, that it was a close game. I don't know if it was as good a look for Oklahoma like you'd want, because they were way behind in this game.
It was weird because it's like it wasn't a great look, but then it kind of was.
Because of that ability to come back.
But it was really on the hands of one guy, Jalen Hurts, who also had several turnovers in the game early that cost them some.
3 turnovers in the game, yeah. Yeah, 2 fumbles and an interception. Did end up with 297 yards through the air, led the team in rushing with 114 yards, scored 4 touchdowns. So all in all, Baylor got to them, but it just wasn't enough. They couldn't hold off the Sooners. If I'm going to go back to that eye test, from an eye test, I left with more questions about both the teams than I felt like got answered. So I don't know that that's the thing that the Big 12 could have afforded in order to get in this playoff mix.
No, and they, again, we'll talk about the last night's rankings, but based on what I saw there, it's going to be real tough.
Yep,
they're on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I would agree, but this,
no matter what happens, really. I mean, if Baylor and Oklahoma were to win out big and then go and play each other again, and Oklahoma were to, just blow them out. Because I even think if they were to do that, I think Baylor's gone after this. I think even if Baylor blew Oklahoma out in the championship game, there was not enough love from the get-go when they were undefeated and looking good. There's other teams that are going to be vying for that 4 slot that will, I think, very quickly they'll get bounced out of the picture in Baylor. However, there might be something with Oklahoma if they blow them out, but it'll be a very slim chance in my mind.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, I guess I maybe should have thought about this another way, is not only did it need to be close, but it needed to be a clean game where it looked like 2 heavyweights going toe-to-toe. There was a lot of sloppiness at times in this game, which made both teams not look as good as you would want in a battle like this of ranked teams. So, again, I don't know that there's a whole lot to say because there wasn't love coming in. Baylor wasn't getting love at 13 coming in with an undefeated record, obviously losing the game. Oklahoma not looking good early and making a lot of unforced errors, and then having to scrap back and claw back in it. And they did win it, but I think it's going to take some magic. And I think Oklahoma's the only one that can get back in this. I don't think if Baylor beats Oklahoma, I think that actually, from a perception standpoint, if I was to guess, is going to say they're not in it.
It's kind of sad, I guess, because I do appreciate – I love what Matt Rule's done. He definitely should be nominated for Coach of the Year. And I think Baylor's done great stuff. But unfortunately – we are a world and a society that, hankers on media. We hanker on the what we get fed from the media. Not as many people dive into it further and formulate their own opinions. Mm-hmm. But we are revolving around what we're fed. And perception sometimes isn't reality. But perception sometimes is reality, but unfortunately perception isn't reality in this case. I think Baylor's much better. I think they could be deserving. But there's only 4 slots.
Yep.
There's only 4 slots.
Yep.
And so at the end of the day, the perception that everyone sees them as is really what is becoming the reality, even though it shouldn't be. So I hate that for them. But there is only so. It's why we love college football. Every game matters, and they needed to win that game. So now we will move on to the third biggest game of the weekend, and probably the one I was looking forward to just as much as that one. That was the Georgia Bulldogs traveling to Jordan-Hare to take on the Auburn Tigers. This game started out all Georgia.
Yep.
If you don't know, Georgia has had 3 shutouts this season by their defense. They hadn't let anyone score a touchdown on the ground. I repeat, not a single rushing score have been put on them this season until this game.
Yep.
And it wasn't from a running back.
Nope.
It was from our true freshman friend, Bo Nix. Listen, Auburn's defense did their thing. They slowed him down. I give Fromm's a good quarterback. Georgia did what they, had to do and played good defense, controlled the game. It wasn't like they blew them out. They were up in this game, 21-0, I think it got.
Yep. Yeah, third quarter. They scored a touchdown every quarter through the third quarter.
And then in the fourth quarter, Auburn starts to mount a comeback. Nick scores on the rushing, first one given up.
Scored early in the fourth quarter.
And the defense for Georgia, I still think they did a great job.
Yep.
They're a really good defense, and they're not flashy, but they're on the radar. But they still did a great job.
Auburn ran 94 plays in this game.
Look, and here's the other thing. After Auburn, each of those 2 touchdowns they put on in the fourth, and Georgia got the ball back, Auburn's defense came out and shut down Georgia's offense. I mean, I think they were 3 and outs on both occasions, punting right back, giving Auburn the opportunity to get back. Auburn had the opportunity. It was a bad throw on that rollout on 4th and 2 from Nix after everything he did.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't make these. You're not in high school. You shouldn't make a bonehead play like that. He was wide open.
Was that on 4th or was that third down?
4th and 2.
It was 4th and 2 when he made that. I thought it was the play before.
They still had a shot after that. I think they they gave the ball back and then turned Georgia over again, but I think it was too little too late. But, it was just, you've done all that. All you got to do is just, if you can't throw it like moving to your right and throw it across your body out to the right, then, underhand the dang thing, man. Just take 2 hands and give him a little zip. But he couldn't, the guy, and that could have changed the game. If they picked that up, they were already in Georgia territory. I definitely think they could have pressed to put points on the board, whether it's a touchdown or a field goal. Because a guy like Gus Malzahn may have been like, okay, we have, if they got closer in field goal range, let's go ahead and kick the field goal. The defense is playing well. Let's do it and try to go out, and then we'll win the game. So, but, that really ended up being the downfall. And it sucks because, Nick's 30 for 50, 245, 1 TD. On the ground, he was 13 for 42, 1 TD. And then just one little bonehead play, and I'm not saying that they would have won the game, but it definitely would have changed the complexion of the game at that point.
Well, in fairness, we're talking about they ran the ball 21, 32, 33, 34, 35. Excuse me. They ran the ball 35 times in this game. Nobody carried the ball for more than 3.5 yards per carry. Didn't even touch 3.5 yards per carry. The overall average, I'm guessing just by looking at it, is right around 3 yards or maybe even sub 3 yards. Longest run of the day was 9 yards for this team. You're asking a freshman quarterback to throw the ball 50 times against a top 5 team, a defense that's just brutal.
One of the best in the country, if not the best.
I give him a lot of credit in this game for making it a game. The fourth quarter was very exciting. You're right. Auburn had their chances. I can't hang it on that 4th and 2. Again, a freshman quarterback throwing the ball 50 times is a hell of a lot to ask. And,
I know you can't hang it on, but you don't think he was like,
it was like, of all ways to miss. Yeah. It was a bad throw. But, then you got, Jake Fromm, he did get 3 touchdowns, but, he was sub 50% completion percentage, and he only threw for 110 yards in this game. Swift was solid on the ground. That was their bell cow. He did fumble the ball. He had the 1 turnover in the game. The game was relatively clean offensively. Only a total of 3 sacks between both teams and only 1 turnover, which is the fumble I just talked about. So it was an old school.
I know Cager's good. I know he's a little banged up, but I'm looking down all their receivers. Not a single receiver had over 50 yards, and not a single receiver had more than 3 catches.
Yeah, it's a good.
That might be a problem. It might end up being a problem.
It is, but when I would see is that
if you go against a high-powered team and you need explosive plays, where is it going to come from?
So what you're saying is all these teams we're talking about are flawed that have a chance.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
I
why
agree.
we're talking about
I
it.
agree. And think about this. Well, the defensive line got a lot of pressure and were on him. And I will kind of credit some of this to Fromm's, experience and his ability to manage a game. Again, they only had in this game 1 sack on him, and yet still not able to get the ball downfield. This was played old. This was an old school game. This was played old school. It really was. I mean, I get it that Auburn was passing, but they were coming back.
Game.
Yeah,
I mean, let's be honest. The SEC is not 46-4 LSU, 41 Alabama. That's not what we're used to.
And Georgia had a game plan. They said, "Look, you're going to beat us through the air. If you're going to beat us, you're going to beat us through the air." And I got to be honest with you, they almost got tied in the game. So I mean, they were going toe to toe with them. So again, it played out well. I think it looks good for Georgia. It's a good win, but it's kind of an interesting. It's kind of interesting, like you said, when they need to be explosive, are they going to be able to do it?
Yeah, I get. We'll wrap this with, and I'll share this on Facebook with a post. Look, credit to Georgia. They now getting that done. They have what Georgia Tech I think left. They have A&M. Oh, they have A&M.
A&M, then Tech. Yep.
But only tough from the college football playoff perspective because they're going to the
they are
SEC
locked in.
title game.
They are
So
locked into the
credit
title
to them. And here's the fun part, which I'll share a video after the game. And I love Kirby Smart. I do. I think he's a great coach. I think he was the right guy. He will lead them there. If it's not this year, I thought it would be. He'll get them in the conversation year after year, and eventually they'll get one under him. I do believe that. But at the end of the game, he was so stoked, jumping up and down on the field when it was over because they won the SEC East that he, tumbled over and he took a spill, baby. It was pretty funny. And then he bounced it. He was like, oh, and then he bounced it. But he was all smiles. And, Kirby is, a business-like guy, much like a Nick Saban. Not a lot of the time do you see him like Dabo, happy, smiley, but he was happy.
But he's got he's
not Nick Saban.
He's a little bit more emotional. He isn't the Oscar the Grouch looking Nick Saban. Nick Saban literally looks like he popped out of a trash can.
He might have more emotions than being monotone, but you don't see him happy, smile, happy-go-lucky all the time, but he was jumping up and down so happy, and then he took a spill, and he's happy, and he bounced back up, and he's happy, and good for you, Coach Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. After that, devastating loss to South Carolina, you've put yourself right back in the conversation, and you deserve it. That will wrap this up, and we're going to move right into the preview. We appreciate you listening. See you as always
on the gridiron.
Have a good day.